Okay, it's 7 o'clock, and I am told we start promptly on time, so we're going to start now. My name is Mary Daum, and I am a new member of the Kensington Historical Society. On behalf of the KHS President, Kate DeWitt, and the rest of the board, welcome to tonight's speaker event. Before I introduce Dr. Oakes, I would like to let you know that after his talk, we will take questions from the audience and also from the folks on Zoom. So the folks on Zoom, put your questions in the chat, please. Thank you. And afterwards, Catherine and Maria have graciously provided lovely looking refreshments, so please stay around and have some and chat. Two quick shout outs for Kensington events. The summer concert series begins this Saturday, 10 o'clock, and that's each Saturday through the summer across from the farmers market, and that's fun. I go there almost every week, so that's a lot of fun. Also join us for Kensington Juneteenth celebration, Saturday, June 14th, which is it's at St. Paul's Park from 12 to 4. I am now delighted to introduce Dr. Stephen Oakes. He is the Lawler Family Chair of History at Georgetown Preparatory School, where he has taught U.S. and AP U.S. history for the last 48 years. Dr. Oakes is the author of many books, including The History of Georgetown Prep. He has also written 2 books that became the basis for documentary films. As Georgetown Prep school historian, Dr. Oakes has curated 5 exhibits, including Endowment of Tears, Hope for Reconciliation, Georgetown Preparatory School, and Slavery. Dr. Oakes has a BA in History and an MA and PhD in American History. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Oakes.
I'm going to try to adjust this, so there we go. Hopefully that'll be picking things up. Thank you for that kind introduction, Mary. I would especially like to thank her for all the work she did in putting together this evening. On a personal note, I've known Mary for over 40 years, a very long time. As I taught with her late husband, Gary Daum, an amazing musician, director, photographer, and teacher, a walking symphony of one. So I'm especially honored to be here this evening. Mary indicated that some members of the Historical Society asked that I explain the relationship of Georgetown Prep to Georgetown University, as well as the story behind Prep's move to your next door neighbor, Garrett Park. I'll attempt to do so during the course of this evening's presentation. I apologize for my voice too, which is really scratchy, and we've had all kinds of pollen issues at school with the juniors I teach, and they finally got to me. So, in June 1915, with World War I raging abroad, and the United States and Germany locked in a crisis regarding the recent sinking of the British liner Lusitania, the Reverend Alphonsus J. Donlin, S.J., the Jesuit president-rector of Georgetown University, presided over a joyous commencement ceremony at the college, seemingly far removed from the chaos and the carnage of war. Donlin used his welcoming speech at the beginning of the ceremony to announce a significant step forward in a long-desired project that he had spearheaded since becoming president in 1912, the relocation of the Georgetown University Preparatory School from the banks of the Patowmack, where it had been located since the opening of John Carroll's Georgetown Academy in January 1792, to 90 acres, to 90 acres beautifully situated, that's a quote, in the Maryland countryside south of Rockville, Maryland. The property, which lay 9 miles north of the university, fronted, quote, the splendid Rockville Pike, end of quote, while a trolley line from Wisconsin Avenue in Georgetown out to Rockville had a stop directly behind the property. Donlin insisted that the expanse of the new campus would allow for baseball and football fields and tennis courts. A stream that ran along the western boundary of the property could very easily be dammed to provide a swimming pool for the boys. That never worked out. It worked out well for geese and ducks, but not for the boys. He also added that the privacy and security of the site would be ensured by the nearby presence of suburban villas owned by socially prominent figures such as Charles I. Corby and Gilbert H. Grosvenor. After briefly describing the general plan that called for buildings in the, quote, beautiful and commodious Georgian style, end of quote, Donlin declared that he expected construction to begin soon. Privately, Donlin hoped that the preparatory school would open in the fall of 1917. The roots of the decision to move the preparatory school lay in the hybrid nature of Georgetown University's history as both a preparatory school and what we understand today as a college. The Georgetown University Preparatory School was, in 1912, a constituent part of Georgetown College. And from 1792, when classes first began, until 1899, the preparatory department of Georgetown College had matured into the Georgetown Preparatory School. Between 1915 and 1921, Georgetown College purchased the property that became the site of the new prep campus, and then had raised money for construction of the central and north wings of what became known in 1988 as Boland Hall. From the opening of the new prep in 1919 at Garrett Park, Maryland, until the formal designation in 1923 of the Georgetown Prep Jesuit community as a separate house of the Society of Jesus, the university had superintended the new prep. But there was another side of that relationship, one often overlooked. For Georgetown College itself initially grew out of the preparatory school, Georgetown Academy, founded by John Carroll, Reverend John Carroll, in 1789, with classes first beginning in January of 1792. Father Carroll was fired by a sense of mission and had great hopes for the new institution. Writing to a close friend in England, Carroll declared that on this academy is built all my hope of permanency and success to our holy religion in the United States. He hoped that as it matured into a college, the school would produce candidates for the priesthood and virtuous laymen who would prove good citizens of the new republic. Father Carroll would be named first Catholic bishop in the United States and later its first archbishop. 13-year-old William Gaston of New Bern, North Carolina, the first student to arrive in 1791 at the site of the yet unfinished school building, wrote to his mother, "A more beautiful situation than this could not be imagined. On a high hill with a view on one side of the river, on the other the town, quite surrounded by trees, it stands as if it were made on purpose for the erecting of some such building." Once classes commenced, Gaston noted the national character of the school, which has persisted down to the present day, which welcomes students regardless of religious belief from around the country and from the local area. Quote, "From all quarters they come to it," Gaston marveled to his mother. Excuse me. And this included international students. The first brothers, Nicolas and Jean-Jacques Favrier, from the French colony of Saint-Domingue in the Caribbean, arrived within 3 months of the opening of school in 1792. During the course of the 1790s, 46 students from what school authorities termed Central America, most from the West Indies, and 6 from Europe would constitute slightly over 18% of the 277 students who attended the school. So from the first, Georgetown Prep was an international school, as well as a residence school. The first college prospectus, printed after the founding, was published in French and Spanish, as well as in English. And Georgetown was a capital school, whose students in August 1797 listened to remarks delivered from the front porch of Old North, the second academic building opened on the campus in 1797. They were addressed by George Washington, who had earlier in March finished his second term as President of the United States and had come to the campus to visit his grandnephews, Augustine and Bushrod Washington. One of the many enjoyable things about teaching AP US History at Prep is the opportunity it provides me to engage the guys by citing the numerous occasions numerous occasions when Prep's history intersected the larger national story. Great expectations indeed for a new institution. And the preparatory school continued to play an essential role in the life and development of Georgetown College during much of the 135 years during which the two now separate corporate entities were one. Take, for example, the following. The school's first student, William Gaston, arrived at the age of 13. The original admission requirements, as set down by John Carroll, allowed for boys as young as 8 years old to be enrolled, provided they knew how to read. From the beginning of classes until 1908-1909 academic year, preparatory students outnumbered the college men on the college campus, usually by large margins. The college did not grant its first college degrees, 2 of them, until 1817, 24 years after the school first opened. The median entering age of students during the 1830s was 12 years old. For the 1840s, 14 years, 6 months. For the 1850s, 14 years, 2 months. For the 1870s, 15 years and 1 month. In 1838, at the time of the sale of the 272 enslaved persons from the farms belonging to the Maryland province of the Society of Jesus, 75% of the students at the college were preparatory department students, including the nephew of one of the 2 Louisiana planters who purchased the enslaved persons. In 1854, 204 of the 283 students at the college were enrolled in the preparatory department. By the 1850s, school authorities decided to provide a building on Georgetown's campus designated for the exclusive use of the prep students. Initially known as the Preparatory Building and later renamed McGuire Hall, it opened in 1855. Built at a cost of $20,000, the 4.5-story structure contained a playroom, public hall, classrooms, a study hall, and open-floor dormitories. The separation of prep students from collegians thus became more complete. That separation could also be seen in academics because in 1856, the year following completion of the building, the lower school began to follow its own calendar, with classes beginning on September 1, 2 weeks earlier than the traditional start of school for the college men. Pictured, here you can see the preparatory school building, and it's the middle one, and you can see that it's up there on the hilltop of Georgetown University. Okay, you can see the handball court also, where the students played handball. That was a big entertainment for them at the school. Okay, and here you can see in the open dormitory. This is the open dormitory in McGuire Hall. So the boys were all in those dormitories, and they're open, and that's how they lived. Okay, in that preparatory department, the building. The evolution of the Georgetown University Preparatory School on the road to 1912. The Civil War and the immediate post-war period proved difficult for the college, but in the years following, the Reverend Patrick Healy, acting president beginning in 1873-74 and president from 1874 to 81, embarked on an ambitious plan to transform Georgetown into a full-fledged university with the construction of the iconic building that came to be known as Healy Hall. A reorganization also ensued for the preparatory department, with the first 2 years designated as the preparatory division and the second 2 called the junior division. Life for the students in the preparatory and junior division settled into a pleasant rhythm, and you can see the cows grazing on the grass in front of Healy Hall. By the way, Patrick Healy, I apologize for my voice. Patrick Healy was the son of an Irish-American planter and his wife, who was an enslaved person. They built, and he and his 4 brothers were all sent away from Georgia to Holy Cross College, where they were raised by Jesuits. That was in order to get them out of the enslaved status that they, of course, would have because slavery passed through the mother. And there were 3 daughters who also were sent away, and they were in convent schools in Canada. So a remarkable family. Patrick Healy's one brother became Bishop of Maine, right? And his other brother, Alexander Sherwood, became the rector of the cathedral in Boston. So just a really very prominent family. And the last brother, a Coast Guard cutter, is named after him. He was in the very early development of what came to be called the Coast Guard. Like I said, a very remarkable family. This yardstick is a measuring instrument for boys. In 1870, it was decided that no students younger than 12 could be accepted into the college, 12 having been determined to be, quote, an age at which one is capable of appreciating the advantages of college life. A student's height determined whether he lived in the small boys or large boys dormitory, with 5'4" representing the demarcation. Enrollment figures for the 1870s and 80s indicate that the preparatory and junior divisions accounted for approximately 70% of the college of students on the college campus. Okay. Now the medical and law schools were located in other parts of the city, and they're growing very rapidly. So the total university population, right, is higher, but we're talking about students at the college campus itself. During the 1890s, President J. Haven Richards, S.J., who had a personality much like his photograph indicates, suggested the elimination of the prep school altogether so that Georgetown could focus on becoming one of the elite universities in the United States. Stymied in that effort, Richards sought to adhere to the standards established by the increasingly influential and powerful state and regional accrediting associations, such as the New York State Board of Regents and the Middle States Association of Colleges and Preparatory Schools. These organizations insisted on a clear divide between high school and college departments and urged institutions to choose whether to concentrate their efforts at the secondary or the collegiate level, and putting a lot of pressure on them to do so. Now, at the college, as a result of this pressure and just the developments of the institution, formerly joint preparatory and college functions at Georgetown reflected the new approach of separation. In the spring of 1990, for example, the preparatory department held its own commencement ceremony apart from the college one. Now, Richards described the prep exhibition, which featured music performed by the junior orchestra, the junior banjo and guitar group, and individual soloists, as, quote, more interesting than the senior commencement. In addition, the Georgetown College catalog in 1890 provided for the first time a separate listing of the preparatory department faculty, which numbered 18. By that year also, in imitation of the college men, students in the upper two grades of the preparatory department formed their own athletic association, precursor of the later student government, to oversee team sports. Beginning with baseball in the 1870s, and followed by football, rowing, track, and basketball, interscholastic team sports, spurred by the interest generated by the college teams, became very popular among the prep students, thus fostering prep school spirit. Capping the decade's developments, the 1899-1900 school year saw Georgetown University publish a separate catalog for what it now formally called the Georgetown Preparatory School. And so hopefully, were you able to run through those? Or are you doing it right now? Yeah, okay, so these are examples. This is the crew team, right, 1905. And we have the track team, that's 1906. One of them is 1906. I can't see the other date. All right, the track team, the basketball team, right? And there is the first catalog, formal catalog of the preparatory school. Okay, excuse me. Sorry. Good. Let me catch up here with this. Okay, great. In addition, while secondary students continued to outnumber collegians on campus, their proportion of the total population at the university declined, thus making the high school students less crucial to the university's finances. During the 1889-90 academic year, the prep department totaled 148 students as compared to only 81 in the college department. The law school, however, one of the largest in the nation, boasted 226 students, while the medical school counted 86. The preparatory students continued to outnumber college men on campus, though that gap narrowed significantly by the 1906-1907 school year. Even so, some urged removal of the prep students from campus so that Georgetown could truly become a full-fledged university, unencumbered by high school students. The Reverend David Buell, president of the university, opposed the idea because he insisted that the revenue generated by the prep school was still crucial to the university. Indeed, it had been since Georgetown's founding. But the 1908-1909 academic year finally saw the college men on campus gain numerical superiority over the prep students, and the margin widened during the next decade. Within the university, numerous other concerns also forced administrators to grapple with relocating the prep school. One vexing issue arose from the proximity of the Georgetown campus to the town of Georgetown and the city of Washington, D.C., and the availability of alcohol in those environs. Problems arising from that situation led officials to argue that the preparatory school should move to country surroundings, far from the distractions of the city, and thus more conducive to, quote, earnest study and proper physical development of the students. Of course, even prohibiting the prep students from going into the city without an accompanying prefect did not prevent them from acquiring bad habits from the increasing number of collegians already on campus. Beginning in 1902, the university's policy of shifting from open 30-bed dormitories in McGuire Hall for the prep students to double or private rooms located throughout 5 different residence halls further complicated the situation and worried President Joseph Himmel. He fretted that the dispersal of prep students made their supervision by prefects more difficult and exposed them more directly to the negative influence of the older college students. Finally, the mixed secondary college setting increasingly dissatisfied both the college and the prep school constituencies. The hybrid nature of Georgetown University damaged the public's perception of the institution as a true university and deterred prospective college students who did not relish sharing space with high school students. The parents of prospective preparatory students, on the other hand, who now had more options because of the growing number of Catholic high schools, became reluctant to send their sons to the preparatory school because they did not want them marginalized within a collegiate structure. Donlin came to believe that the latter situation negatively impacted the academic quality of the preparatory school. Parents now want a separate school for their boys, Donlin would explain to the Father General, one removed from the city, so we are not at this time getting the best class of students. Donlin moved decisively to address the situation. On October 14, 1912, he secured from his Jesuit consultors a resolution, quote, to establish a new preparatory school and to apply for permission to secure grounds, therefore, provided such grounds shall be sellable. It should be noted that while Donlin and his consultors wanted to transfer the preparatory school away from the Georgetown hilltop, they intended that it remain a part of the Georgetown University and that it continue to serve as a feeder school for the college. They did not envision the prep becoming financially, legally, or in any other way independent of the university. On November 5th, 1912, the province consultors authorized Donlin, quote, to prepare the way for a new preparatory school by selecting a site, proposing it to the alumni advisory board of the college, etc. The Father General also encouraged Donlin. Now, the successful completion of such an ambitious undertaking, however, would require time, planning, money, and good luck. Donlin privately confessed little hope for the immediate establishment of a new school, especially after a disappointing meeting with his alumni advisors, whom he described as, quote, essential for success, but not now. But meanwhile, John Agar, an active member of the Alumni Association who had attended the prep school and earned his BA, MA, PhD, and LL degrees from Georgetown University, conceived the idea of a board of regents and led a successful drive among alumni to raise the money needed to purchase land for the relocation of the prep school. During the spring of 1915, Donlin, accompanied by Thomas Emmett, his prefect of discipline at the university and later the first superior headmaster of Georgetown Prep, and George E. Hamilton, a prominent lawyer in the District of Columbia and the dean of the Georgetown University Law School since 1900, investigated possible sites for the new prep school. Hamilton, who had entered the prep department in 1865 at the age of 11 and graduated from the college in 1872 and the law school in 74, lived on an estate in Bethesda known as Stone Ridge and suggested property about 2 miles north of his own. On July 14, 1915, the president and directors of Georgetown College purchased 91.83 acres of land, it was a dairy farm, in Montgomery County from Hillary and Kate Offit for $32,140.50, all of which have been raised in the alumni fundraising drive. A month earlier, at a meeting of the Board of Regents, Donlin and the board decided on a vigorous campaign to raise the funds necessary to erect the buildings and develop a thoroughly modern school. Continuing to rely on the advice of Hamilton, Donlin hired the Washington architectural firm of Marsh and Peter to design the new campus. The drawings were grand. They placed the buildings of the school on a ridge of property that rose to a height of about 40 feet from a ravine near the Rockville Pipe. The projected first building, done in colonial style, consisted of a 4-story main section costing $75,000 and 2 3-story wings costing $50,000 each. The power plant, located for safety reasons in a separate structure and connected by a tunnel with the main building, would be situated at the lowest level of the grounds. Plant, tunnel, and piping would total approximately $20,000. Plans for future development included 5 other buildings, including 4 dormitories, a chapel, a refectory, an auditorium, and a gymnasium. I might add that with the completion of the new residence hall at Prep, almost that entire plan has been realized. Donlin secured approval of the plans from the Georgetown and Maryland, New York Province consultors. The naturally introverted rector of Georgetown then effectively sought the aid of the similarly reserved and fellow Georgetown alumnus Henry Walters, a railroad magnate, philanthropist, and art collector, who was deeply interested in causes pertaining to education, health, and art appreciation. Walters was the son of a railroad owner, William T. Walters, himself an art collector, who, although a nominal Protestant, admired the disciplined and highly structured classical curriculum of the Jesuits that had as its goal, quote, the training not only of the mind, but of the whole man, heart, and soul. 17-year-old Henry Walters was enrolled at Georgetown University in May of '65, started out in the preparatory department and quickly progressed through the curriculum and graduated from the college in 1869. Deeply impressed and inspired during his years at Georgetown and afterwards by the example of his Jesuit teachers, especially the Reverend Daniel Hoff, Walters felt a sense of loyalty to his alma mater and its preparatory school, which made him more receptive to Donlin's appeals. During 1915, Donlin developed a good working relationship with Walters. Later in the year, Donlin sent Walters photographs of the property, the architect's renderings of the buildings, and their memorandums spelling out the cost of the new school. In a letter dated January 6, Little Christmas, 1916, Walters announced himself impressed with the style of the architecture, with its dignified and simple aspect, and also the general plan. He offered to contribute $80,000 for construction of the main building. Intensely private, and in the words of a biographer, almost fanatically adverse to newspaper publicity, Walters stipulated that the inscription on the portico of the building should read, "Gift of the Class of 1869." And those people who are familiar with the school know that going through the front door, you see that gift of the class of '69. Donlin eventually secured authorization from the provincial, but then he had to deal with the inflationary spiral triggered by the voracious Allied demand for American goods as they battled the Central Powers in the war that had been raging in Europe since 1914. Prices jumped 20% between 1915 and 1916. That inflation pushed the estimated cost of the main building from $75,000 to $128,000, and of each of the proposed wings from $50,000 to $70,000. Nonetheless, with $6,000 on hand and pledges from both Walters and the Georgetown Council, Donlin felt justified in beginning the work on the 4-story main building in the hope that its completion would spark additional donations for the construction of the wings. The need of the school is becoming more apparent every day, Donlin wrote to Walters, so I'm most anxious to make a beginning as soon as possible. That beginning came on October 25th, 1916, at a groundbreaking ceremony during which Archbishop Giovanni Banzano, the apostolic delegate, turned the first sod on land near which dairy cows still graze. Donlin's timetable called for the Garrett Park campus to open in October 1917. Indeed, the first page of the bulletin of Georgetown Preparatory School for 1917 read, "Founded 1789, removed to the new site 1917. Donlin planned to open with the 4th preparatory class that is freshmen and a limited number of boys who are not quite ready for this class, who would be admitted and prepared for high school work. The 3 higher classes would finish at the university campus, while successive classes would be added each year at the prep. Formal U.S. entry into World War I in April 1917, however, played havoc with Donlan's timetable. Shortages and continuing inflation that spurred labor unrest slowed progress on the main building. The Transportation Priority Act of 1917 that governed a shipment of all freight, for example, interfered with the normal delivery of building materials. In addition, bad weather and a winter-long strike against the Washington and Rockville Electric Railway Company, whose trolley line ran just west of the prep campus and brought many of the masons, carpenters, and laborers to the building site, caused delay and led to the postponement of the opening of the school in 1917. Additionally, added time for construction translated into cost overruns that far exceeded original estimates and increased Donlan's anxiety. On June 9, 1917, however, about 2 months after the United States formally entered World War I, the dedication and blessing of the cornerstone of the new Georgetown Preparatory School building took place as part of the commencement week activities of Georgetown University. A small, distinguished gathering, including Donlan and Walters, assembled for a ceremony that the Georgetown College Journal characterized as democratic because of the absence of pomp and the cheerful tone of the crowd. Some of them climbed from floor to floor in the yet unfinished building that nonetheless boasted a roof and a cupola and a nearly finished front portico. Walters was so moved by the ceremony that he eased Donlan's worry over spiraling costs by increasing the amount of his gift from the original $80,000 to $130,000. Now you can see a view here of the east side of the main building, and that's where it stood. No trees, right? It's just a dairy farm, and then the view from the view of the west side, right, the back side of the building, with the path that leads all the way down to the trolley stop. Donlan hoped to see the school open in October 1918, and the main building stood ready by then. But the exigencies of war once again intervened. For when the central section of Boland Hall was opened in 1918, its first residents were not Georgetown Prep students. No. Rather, the first occupants of the new campus of the nation's oldest Catholic boys' high school were single women who had come to Washington, D.C. during World War I to provide clerical support for the War Department. Let me just turn the page here. Okay, good. Good. They came to reside at the new campus because of Georgetown University's desire to support the war effort by helping to alleviate the wartime housing crisis for women, which was really, really bad in Washington, D.C. To that end, the university leased the main building and 10 adjoining acres of the Georgetown Preparatory School grounds to the War Works Council of the YWCA. The council was led by one of America's most influential women, Abigail Aldrich Abby Rockefeller, of whom one of her male associates said, had she been born a man, she surely would be a general. Right? The armistice, sorry with the pages here. Between June 1918 and mid-April 1919, the YWCA provided living quarters at what it called Georgetown House. Approximately 70 of those residents were United States Marine Corps reservists who were, according to a report by the Housing Committee, were willing to take the long trip back and forth to the United States Marine Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C. for the sake of living so comfortably and reasonably. In addition, during the pandemic of 1918-19, part of the Georgetown House was used as a recuperation site for women recovering from influenza. And you can see the women at Georgetown Prep had to get on that trolley and go all the way down to Washington and then gather on the ellipse, right, for a drill, which began at 7 a.m. All right, they liked living out at a distance, but they had to pay the price. The armistice of 1918 ended World War I and also the need for Georgetown House. By May 1919, the last women had departed. In June, Mrs. Rockefeller sent a note to Father Creedon, the president of Georgetown, which read in part, "I wish to tell you how very much we appreciate the many kindnesses and courtesies shown to us by you and your associates. One of the secretaries said to me, she thought that our dealings with you have been more pleasant and satisfactory than with any other group of men. It's like damning with faint praise, right? So there we go. That September, Georgetown University Preparatory School welcomed its first freshman class to its Garrett Park location. The voices ringing through the halls of the main building were now quite different from those of a few months earlier. And at first glance, it seemed that except for some furniture in dormitory rooms, nary a trace remained of the women of Georgetown House. But such was not the case. For in December 1919, a temporary gymnasium, the first athletic facility of the new prep, was completed in time for the school's inaugural basketball season. That wooden structure was paid for by the rental income from the YWCA lease. The old gym stood on the prep campus until 1993, a concrete legacy of those women who had indeed been here first. As classes began, the members of the class of 1869 presented a final gift to the school, a framed photo of the Reverend Daniel Hoff. The brass plate attached to the gilt Baroque frame read, Reverend Daniel T. Hoff, S.J., the memory of whose priestly virtue inspired the class of 1869 to donate the main building to Alma Mater. The new prep would graduate its first class of seniors in June 1923. That year would also mark an institutional graduation of prep within the Society of Jesus. For shortly after graduation, it was publicly announced that the Jesuit Superior General had declared the Jesuit community at Georgetown Prep an independent house of the Society of Jesus, no longer part of the Jesuit community of Georgetown University. The Reverend Thomas Emmett, and family members are here tonight, the Reverend Thomas Emmett was named Superior of the new community, as well as Headmaster of Georgetown Prep. For all practical purposes, Georgetown Prep was now autonomous from Georgetown University in all matters, but the most important financial decisions. Under Emmett's leadership, Georgetown Prep would add the south wing to the main building in 1929. The north wing had been completed earlier in 1921. A dispute with Georgetown University over the financing of that new wing would lead in 1927 to the complete legal separation of the two institutions after 135 years of mutually assured existence. AMDG, for the greater glory of God. There we go. Thank you. Okay. Are there any questions? Would you?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Oates, so much. Are there questions here in the room, or are there questions on people have written into the chat on Zoom? I see you raising your hand about some questions from Zoom.
Yes, Elaine wanted to know if there's any way for Kensington residents to tour the Georgetown Prep.
Could you repeat the question if you want?
Yes. Yes, excuse me, sorry. I apologize for my voice. Yes, the question was, is there any way for residents of the area to tour the campus? And certainly, you can just give a call to the school operator, and she'll direct you to the person that you should talk to, and we're always delighted to have people come on campus.
Yes, sir.
So I have a question. Since one of the motives for moving the prep school out of Georgetown was the unsavory environment, what was the environment around prep during its first decade or so of existence? Yeah,
well, there was the unsavory part was the office store. That was the only about unsavory thing out there, right? And it wasn't unsavory. It was just a store, right? It's just a store. It eventually becomes Hank Deedle's, which and I need say nothing more, right? On that score. But yeah, it was really it was very isolated. I mean, there were a few houses, big homes and that kind of thing, but very very isolated. So the boys would go down when the trolley with a prefect, and on the weekends they'd go down to Washington City. Seniors eventually got permission to go down alone, but they had to be back by 4 o'clock. And that was when the confessions were held, and they had mass at 5. So I mean, it was just every Saturday was like that, irrespective of whether they went to the town or not. Yeah. Yes.
Was the Garrett Park railroad station used for commuting or moving of luggage?
The guy, let me, I don't know, I'm not sure. I would certainly think it would have been, but I can't say definitely. I know that whatever connected to, and that usually was going through, the big railway station, downtown. There's a mass, exit to that railway station at every vacation and all that kind of
So
stuff.
I guess the trolley station was the more important hub.
Oh, yes. Oh, no, yeah, exactly, yeah. And then the boys went down to via that trolley to Georgetown campus to watch the college games. They were big fans. The prep school really operated as a feeder for the college, even after the divorce of sorts, right? So yeah.
There's a question back here. Yes, sir.
That portrait of Mr. Walters is spectacularly good. Is there a way of finding out who painted it?
I'm sure there is. I don't know. I don't know who that person was, but I thought it was really a beautiful painting, and it's so similar to the photographs of it. I mean, it's really lifelike. Yeah, and he was, he was, very very generous with his money in terms of philanthropy in Baltimore, and he erected bathhouses for for the immigrant population, and he didn't want any publicity. And it's funny, we have we've got three examples actually of that. The person who built the new dormitory, which is a really spectacular building, he also asked to be anonymous. And then the woman who built the chapel. The chapel is just a wonderful building. It's just so beautiful. But she asked to be anonymous in life and death. So for me, as a historian, I can't write about her very much because we really respect that, and so. But it's very frustrating, I really want to say, look, let us off the hook, because it's a great story. It's a really good story, and but two anonymous donors, yeah. So we've been very blessed with that, yeah.
Are there any other questions on the Zoom chat?
How many students do they have now?
How many students are at prep today? We have 500. 125 of those are resident students, and then the others are day students. Okay, so the resident program is very vital, and it's a very important part of the school. Yes.
Any other students from foreign countries?
Oh yes, we have a whole international program, and you saw that in the very first year, within 2 months, there were students from foreign countries. When prep moved out here to Garrett Park, there were 41 students in that first class, and I think in that class there were 8. It's either 8 or 7 students who were from foreign countries. So a high population there. Yeah.
Sir, did you have a question?
Yes. How much was tuition and room and board?
Look, I'm from Peoria, Illinois, and I want to tell you, when I go home and my family, my people say, "Hey, what's it like to teach at a place like Georgetown Prep?" And I said, "Well, Washington's a different place. And how much is tuition?" I literally can't tell them that. I can't say it. I'm too embarrassed, right? Back then, right, it was what was it? $500, I believe, for resident students, and $275 for day. But don't hold me to that. It's a lot. A lot. But back then, $1 was like, a lot. Yeah. So yeah. Yes.
This lady here. You mentioned Stone Ridge. Was there ever a relationship between the two schools, or is there still a relationship?
Well, we have some joint activities with them. A lot of our guys date a lot of Stone Ridge girls, but they also date Holy Cross girls, and other stuff. But we don't have. There's no corporate. The history of this is that the sisters who run Stone Ridge had a long tradition of cooperating with Jesuits, so that there's a certain affinity, a certain shared some things in the past. Yeah. Yes.
With Stone Ridge, now, did Hamilton give that property to the nuns?
Yes, to the Sisters of Sacred Heart. The religious of the Sacred Heart. Yes, yeah.
His daughter.
Is there any other from Zoom?
Yes, we just got one. So Elaine would like to know what percentage of graduates go on to Georgetown University, and also are there any distinguished alumni that you could mention?
Yes, both. Georgetown is usually the single largest number of, so let me put it another way, the single largest number of our seniors tend to go to Georgetown, right? But because we're a much larger school than we used to be, right? And because, they're looking for various things and all that, it's not nearly as much as of course, in the past that we're talking about here. Yes. As far as distinguished alumni, there are, yes, and two of them I taught. Justice Gorsuch and Justice Kavanaugh, and of course Powell, Mr. Powell, who's the head of the Federal Reserve, yeah, so people like that, yeah.
Robert Kennedy was Secretary of...
That's true, yes. Now, he left at the end of his 8th grade. Yeah, so he was Prep had a 7th and 8th grade from 1941 until 1967. And so Robert Kennedy was on the Prep campus when he learned the news about his father's, what had happened to his father. And one of the Jesuits who had been there a long time was the person who had to tell him. And so he left. He didn't come back. But yeah.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
When was the first African-American student?
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah. Okay. So Prep had. This is ironic. So 80 years before Prep had its first African-American student, it had a rector who had of African heritage, right? And Patrick Healy. Now, he was light-skinned, and people knew, but it wasn't, the students sometimes refer to him as the Spaniard, right? Because his kind of darker skin. So the first Prep student of African-American heritage was Anthony Pierce, and he entered Prep in September of 1953. So he entered in the same year, the school year, as Brown versus Board of Education decision in May of '54. And he lives in California today, and he is, I know him very well, because I wrote about that, the admission of the first black student. And a very nice guy, really good guy. And so it goes back to 1953, yeah. It was the first, yeah, go ahead.
I say, to follow on that, we're well aware of Georgetown University's slave relationships for long periods of time. Was Prep ever part of that process, given they were together for a long time?
Right. So, yes, we were, and we are. I was one of the people who was able to get into the Georgetown financial records, the college's financial records, and the financial records of the province, in terms of slavery and investigating slavery and its impact. So we had an exhibit in 2018 entitled Endowment of Tears, and we really traced the sale of the 272 and then slavery at the college. Had a whole program for the students, and every year we have a program for our entering freshmen so that they know the story. And then in junior year, when we do U.S. history, of course, they're part of that whole migration, forced migration that goes from the upper South into the lower South, right? And we have two. Right now, we have right now we have one student who is a direct descendant of one of the 272, and in the class of 2020 had also one descendant. And we've been involved in helping to identify descendants, and so that's and we also have in the chapel of Our Lady. When you walk in, there's a side chapel, and there's the Blessed Mother is over on the left, and there is a huge blow-up of the slave census of 1838, in which each of those names is written, right, the first names. And then their Father Van Dyke, blessed it and put it in a very prominent position. And so it's there. It's again a reminder of our connection to the sale, because the sale was done by the province, right? The sale was done by the province, the Maryland province. But part of the money from that sale went to retire the debt that Georgetown College, Preparatory Department, right, had incurred under Father Malady, and so yeah, we exist because of that sale. In fact, let me just go back further. The only reason that John Carroll was able to establish the school was because of slavery. Slavery, provided the wherewithal by which the Jesuits maintained missions, right? And so in this question about school and all that, in the very first documents for the school, it specifies that the income from one of the farms will be directed to Georgetown College and to the principal of the school. So I mean, yeah, it's really, this is not something that's a pleasant thing that but it's part of our history. And I think the Father Van Dyke and John Glennon, who's the headmaster, they've been very great, really good about being very forthright about things, and these are also jumping off points for discussions with students and about how race is at prep and all that kind of thing. Yeah.
Are students part of the 270, are they scholarshiped at prep?
It's let me put it this way: who are descendants? You mean who are descendants? We don't formally have a program of what do I say? Legacies. Okay, it's supposed to be needs based if you need money, and also merit based if when you're looking at the part. But very definitely, there's a commitment by the school to be as welcoming and as helpful to descendants of the enslaved as possible. So for all practical purposes, yes, yeah, but it's not a formalized thing. Right? Yes.
Is it required that you are Catholic to go to Georgetown Prep?
No. We have about 78% of the students. Something again, don't hold me to the exact. But about 75% are Catholic. And then we have, all kinds of other, denominations, beliefs, etc. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you maybe if you could elaborate a little bit more to the points that you're talking about a moment ago, in terms of, a planter class that would maintain city homes and town homes and the like, apart from the agricultural lands that they owned and controlled, where slavery was involved. Was that sort of part of the student body that was drawn to Georgetown Prep from either the Mid-Atlantic area or the Mid-South or Lower South?
Yeah, that's a really excellent question. So what you have in the middle period, let's do it like this. So when Jesuits arrived in Maryland, right, in 1634, they were required.
St. Mary's County.
Yeah, exactly. They were required, right, by the proprietor to earn to provide for their own living. He would not give any money to them, right? So they became tobacco planters, and they used white indentured labor, as everyone did in the early 17th century. Then towards the end of the 17th century, you have this movement that occurs in Virginia also, where the indentured servant population, right, drops. And that's begins to be replaced by African slaves, right? And so the Jesuits get their first slaves around 1715. And they get them initially by bequests, Catholics who put them in their will. They leave their estate or they leave their slaves to the Jesuits as an endowment or bequest. And so that begins then the whole process by which they had slaves and slave labor became more dominant, etc. So that's where it starts, and that's how it starts. It's a great reminder to us, about the cultural blinders that we all have at each period of time in history, right? That there are certain things that we just make assumptions about, that we don't question, that it seem like, oh, that's an eternal truth. And, that's, when you're raised in an environment like that where slavery is acceptable, everybody, et cetera, et cetera. And remember, this is a world of bondage. We have to remember that, the 17th, 18th centuries, right? And before that, 5,000 years, perhaps 3,000 years, bound labor was what labor was for the most part. And so all of those factors, come in and get involved in that situation. Yeah.
Maybe two more questions?
Okay.
I wonder if you could comment on how, at the time of the founding of Georgetown College, the Jesuit order had been suppressed until 1815. So how did that interfere with?
Yeah, that's a whole area that I thought I can't get into that because, just very briefly, the Jesuits were suppressed by the Pope in 1773 worldwide, except in the Russian Empire. Catherine the Great wouldn't allow the papal bull to be read. So they continued to exist there. So John Carroll was a Jesuit, and he was teaching in Liège, in Belgium, right, at a seminary. And he's literally marched out by Austrian soldiers, like, at bayonet point. So he comes back to America. Now, all these former Jesuits were still priests. They weren't Jesuits. So he comes back and he ministers to people in the area, so to protect their economic interests, like so that they could survive, and in the hopes that the society would be restored, these former Jesuits formed a corporation of Catholic clergy. And that corporation held the land and the slaves, etc., in that corporation, right? So in that situation then, the society is restored. John Carroll does not return to the society, right? Because he's been named bishop and then Archbishop of Baltimore. But that corporation eventually will be supplanted by the Jesuit Maryland province, a whole other thing. But that's how the transition. So was Georgetown College a Jesuit school at the beginning? No, it wasn't. In 1806, 1807, the Jesuits are allowed to associate with the Russian province. And then in 1815 or 1814, the papal bull restoring the society, and then it was a Jesuit school. Yeah.
Maybe one more question.
I'll ask a question because there are several of us who are interested. There's always sports history, not just academic history. When was the golf course built? And it's certainly in my lifetime. And when did they knock down? When did they destroy it to build
Well, athletics and boys, that's a big thing. Right? It's a big deal, right? So in terms of golf, the Prep has its first golf team in 1924. That actually, in 1919, 1920, a Jesuit scholastic built a green, and basically it was a tomato can, right? That's like, pushed down into the grass, and people putt on it. But in 1924, Frank Emmett comes to Georgetown Prep, and his uncle was the first superior. And he is the one who really, puts prep golf on the front pages. In 1926, and there's a really good article on the Washington Post on this, back in the day, like in the 30s, looking back and saying, look, this guy is unbelievable, right? It really, prep became known as the seat of interscholastic golf, and had tremendous teams in the 1930s. So I promise, one of your people that, well, I'll send it, and then she can just first. These are Father Emmett's, family right here, so. And you know, one of his great uncle, his
What, the bishop, we call him Uncle Bishop.
Uncle Bishop. Uncle Bishop, right? Because he became a bishop, he was named a missionary bishop of Jamaica. And so after he left prep, he was in Jamaica, you know, and yeah, there we go. Okay.
Well, thank you so much.
All right, great. All right, great. Thank you.